anyway, I hope that's good. All right. I think we just have one guy who just somehow left. Yeah, somehow. Okay. Anyway, okay, same people. That's good. So we have a recurring.
Getting bigger.
Even bigger. Okay, you got to issue some NFTs for, like you can show off later. So, okay, hi everybody, Kevin, Michael, Ty, and especially Stefan. You are like midnight, right? So hope hope you stay up. Okay, but I can see your sunset. Very good. The picture.
Oh, yeah.
Sunset.
This actually is, yeah, this was a gift from my girlfriend. She took it off the in Cape Town, of the sun setting over the Atlantic.
Oh, cool.
And then she printed it on canvas and shipped it to me. So yeah, so that's why it's hanging here now.
Nice, nice. Okay, cool. All right, gentlemen. What's new? What do you guys want to talk about today? Besides Turing machines and token swaps and ape sing or whatever, whatnot.
It would be fun to continue where we left off as far as being able to do the. I shared this idea a long time ago, but yeah, but I want to be able to do like shares of, in this case, like content on the internet. But you could apply it. I think in that article I wrote, I think it's like a year ago. But you could apply it to all sorts of different things. But you know, what would be the best way of having like a share-based voting mechanism, but also not only just voting, but also distribution of capital or distribution of BSV or, but then, sorry to keep on rambling, but I was wondering, you know, eventually if we do have something like, you know, dollars issued on BSV, then it'd have to work with that. And so I'm not expecting an answer right away, but how would all that work? Is my question.
You said there's an article like 1 year ago you wrote or something?
It was just a GitHub. I don't even use GitHub, but I just needed somewhere to post it. But I was just talking about how share-based voting would be a really useful feature. It was during the Theory of Bitcoin class when you guys were talking about what should we build next.
Mm-hmm.
I actually implemented something like that a few months ago, about 4 months ago. Using just the money button simple fabric protocol tokens, which is essentially, it was sort of a proof of concept, an initial beta for a voting system that briefly ran the voting process for the Gorilla DAO. And it just basically did a couple of things. It had token-based authentication for logging into a SaaS application. It had SaaS membership in a workspace determined by token holding. It had the OAuth workflow with Money Button was integrated into that. And then also there was, you could issue additional tokens and you can sort of choose which of the SFP tokens become voting tokens inside the voting system. And for the actual voting protocol, I implemented this mathematical trick called Peterson commitments, which is a elliptic curve method of doing sort of a blind commit, and then you reveal in a mathematically rigorous way, you can reveal that the prior commitment that I made was actually the one, right? So you have a secret ballot, but then you afterwards reveal the ballot. So this works around the problem of people either front running the vote or people being influenced to vote one way or another by seeing what other people are voting on. But right. Yeah, so it is certainly possible. I've done it with just the existing tools that we have. And I'm now working on a system that is essentially completely separate from just that would work independently of the third-party protocol, where like SFP tokens, where I'm actually implementing just a token protocol on its own that will have all the similar properties that has, or that the SFP had, right? So if you think that the SFP protocol, which is a permissioned protocol tied into Paymail on Money Button, then this would be something that is independent of that, where it is non-permissioned in that way, and it is a little bit freer to work with, but would have similar capabilities in working with. So if you have any, the thing that I'm trying to work out still, right, is one just has to come up with basically a protocol. So, sorry, I need to organize my thoughts, trying to say everything in one.
Go ahead. Take your time.
The things that I thought was that I sort of took away and learned from that exercise. Sorry, I've been chasing this mosquito forever. The thing that I took away from that exercise was essentially that with any token protocol, it works. What works out really well is if your token protocol can integrate some sort of authentication mechanism. OAuth I've always liked because it's sort of it's a federated type. It's a type of federated protocol that works well with these sorts of things, right? Where you have this resource, a permissioned resource that can be accessed and authorized, and then the authorization happens by way of signing of the individual using their keys and their wallet, right? And all of that worked out rather well, including things like signing for your vote, signing over your vote with provably signing your token holding in your wallet at the time. But things like that are important.
And then, but we'll need. It sounded like you almost said that we need like a standard. Do we need like standard protocols for, you know, different basic tokens and stuff like that or something? I don't want to say the word tokens because, yeah. but we need standard protocols for all this stuff to work or not. I don't know. Because that's what we were talking about in the Bitcoin class with Satoshi too, is that there needs to be some sort of, you know, standards.
I think that the things that before I try to invent any new standards of my own, I either look at RFCs or I look at existing internet protocol standards, which is why I like OAuth, right? OAuth is not perfect, but it is so well defined and so well utilized, and OAuth 2 especially works so well with these kinds of workflows, for example, as a protocol, that I would use OAuth for the authorization flow rather than anything else, right? I wouldn't go and invent my own authorization flow. OAuth is flexible enough that you can, for example, work in elliptic curve cryptographic signing into the protocol. But maybe you're asking about the tokens themselves.
Well, I'm talking more about like for like, you know, the share. If you want to do like some sort of share-based voting, again, not for stupid ICOs or stuff like this, but like for like legitimate use cases, if you want to have a YouTube video that when people pay to access it, it, you know, goes to the creator of the video, the producer of the video, the 10 first people that watch it, that sort of thing. You know,
I think that
ahead,
doing. I think that doing what you're talking about is possible inside of. I mean, not necessarily even using a token in the traditional sense, where it's this tangible thing that can be moved and it acts as a share of the content itself, as if the content were a company, but rather one way of implementing it that comes to mind just off the top of my head would be. You could create, for example, an sCrypt contract when you create your video, and that contract is a UTXO with a locking script, and then you could define the sort of the evolution of how this script will sort of morph over time, if you will, and then the different people that are entitled to take out certain amounts. So the way that I would go about implementing this, and I'm a very, you know, I think there's a spectrum between like the people who want to define their tokens in these opportune data structures and derive everything off chain. I wrote a paper and I called those EODs, or EDOs, externally defined overlays. And then there's the other side who like to do everything in script and enforce everything, you know, on I guess the layer 0, more of the STOS methodology. So I'll just preface this by saying that I am a strong supporter of doing things using UTXOs wherever possible. But the way that I would do this is I would, as the creator of the YouTube video, I'd publish a locking script that sort of evolves the more it gets, or kind of changes the properties and constraints as it moves along. Then viewer number 1 could take this locking script, unlock it, pay some money in, and then spend it. Viewer number 2 could take the script and do the same thing. And as the people view these videos, the UTXO gets funded with more Satoshis. And of course, viewer number 1 could push their address onto the state or the stack, if you will, of people who are eventually entitled to receive any future payouts. And the number of people and in what order they could push their addresses on as we propagate this UTXO forward from viewer to viewer could be limited, of course, and the proportions could change. So it could even be like a distribution where you have like 80% of the value goes to the first 20% of viewers, et cetera, et cetera. And as more people watch, they just spend it forward, and then there's public functions that redeem. Now, the obvious problem with this that people have referred to is that you cannot necessarily, you need to spend, you have one UTXO and you need to spend it. And if somebody else spends it at the same time, you have double spend, right? Where you're both trying to propagate a transaction, you have this race, and for millions of views and millions of things per second, that's not necessarily scalable. So the solution that I would propose to that is that, especially in cases where a defined number of future locking script redeemers is known, we could associate each one of them with a sequence number. And then if there are multiple broadcasts, there is a designated person with a higher sequence number that gets the transaction replaced and allows for sort of parallel spending of a UTXO. I don't know if any of that makes sense to anybody. I'm not sure that
what's the last part again? Yeah, I think that's for the UTXO, that's like a common issue, because for example, even Stefan, right? You're asking about is there any like a pure like let's say script-based tokens. So as far as I know, the only way to do it is just you put the giant, like for tokens, usually if it's fungible, it's just a big table, right? You have a user, you have a balance. So the only way I found is you put this giant table in a single UTXO, and then you just keep updating it, right? You can transfer it, you can deposit, you can spend it, whatever. But here the only issue, the same issue just Kai just mentioned, right? Because what if a lot of people try to, race to spend the whole thing? Because at any given time, you only have one table, right? It's like Ethereum, right? It's a count. So only have one copy. Everybody wants to
one update at a time.
So you have to serialize it. It's almost like now you're like defaulting to Ethereum model. You have to add the nonce, right? Like Ethereum, you have the nonce. Every contract, you have to, when you call it, you have to send the right nonce. It's like a counter, right?
Yeah. So I really like Ty's idea. The only thing that I would change there is that I would actually parallelize it by issuing individual UTXOs to each new person. So the UTXO would have the same functionality, meaning that you can still lock up funds or essentially accrue value in the token, but the issuer, who would be me, the content creator, would issue for each person their individual UTXO. And the UTXO state transition function would lock them into only being able to roll forward and accrue additional value in the token, either by redeeming additional tokens. So there would be a reward token that they redeem into accruing value in this new UTXO, or in their existing UTXO. So they would have a bunch of redemption tokens. They would have their core token, which is the core UTXO that has the state transition function that only rolls over on redemption with this external token that is essentially will also be issued to them. But in this way, everybody then has their own UTXO, and the UTXOs can independently roll forward. And because me as the issuer would be able to keep track of everybody's shareholding, I think Ty's idea can still work in the way that he described, except now it's completely parallelized at the UTXO model. I don't know if that makes sense, Ty.
It does, and I think that definitely improves it because it makes it so that we don't have to deal with collisions in having everything go through one single thing. And for some applications, I mean, it's perfectly fine to have everything. If you're running something on a small scale or something where you have a designated and predefined set of participants, such as the case with most sort of contracts, not open-ended things like this where we're viewing a video, but in other cases, I think it's fine. But in this case, I mean, splitting it out and then having maybe having a condition in each of those child UTX, or I guess they would be child UTXOs that have split off from the core, to allow them to kind of re-merge back in to that same core UTXO later to sort of redeem the value. So after that user has finished viewing the video, or after they have, and by the way, I'm thinking to myself as we're going along, if we're having one UTXO essentially per viewer and it's rolling forward already, we may as well incorporate, a non-final. Well, I guess it wouldn't be non-final, but you wouldn't really be bloating the UTXO set either. I'm just kind of thinking about it, but I'm thinking of pay-as-you-go sort of things where you're paying for like 1 minute of the video or whatever, or 1 second, as you kind of roll it forward, and then the creator of the core UTXO could then come back later and reach back and merge it back in whenever they want, and either reissue you another one or something like that, perhaps after a delay, so that at the end, when they want to kind of consolidate all of their views, if you will, into the reward pot at the end of perhaps every month or something, they could do something like that.
Cool.
But yeah, definitely that does optimize for scale.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of ways to do it, and just got to play around with it. But again, there's probably a lot of easy, simple ways that don't scale well, and so you got to really consider the scalability part.
Ty, you just said you have something read up? Is it? You said you
a paper. I said a while ago.
Okay, it's shared in the group. Okay.
I can share it on the Slack also. I put it on the Atlantis Slack, but I will.
Oh, Atlantis. Okay. Yeah, you can also share it in our Slack. That's because I don't quite remember you. I mean, I've seen you share quite a few things. I don't know which one you are specifically mentioned. Refer to this time.
I believe I wrote a paper called Bitcoin Overlay Network Design Methodologies a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
Just talking about the different ways of doing tokens and pro con basically versus these opportune type solutions and the more UTXO-based script-based token solutions. And as I said, I support script-based tokens because of kind of some of the reasons I outlined in the paper. But I think there's a place for both. People use the blockchain as a journaling mechanism, using opportunes for just kind of more transparency, I suppose, and they've made that work. So yeah, just exploring, and then the conclusion of the paper was basically just a list of future research topics. But after this call, I will share that in the sCrypt workspace as well.
That'd be great.
For the op return, sorry, just a quick question. For the op return for journaling, isn't there something where it might be pruned? So it's just like short-term journaling, and if you want to,
so this is a thing that I've written an entire API around this because of the fact that I think it's so misunderstood. I built a thing called NanoStore, and it's useful for on-chain storage. But the idea with this op-return thing, and I will say that I think out of all of the opcodes, op-return is the most misunderstood. People can so if we have things that are not UTXOs or even extraneous parts of scripts, so things at the end of a script that are not needed to make it spendable or something, other than storing the hash of the transaction so that script can be spent in the future, all of that can be pruned by miners. As well as by these service providers. And I think that's the more important thing here. Like what's on chain, for example, or some block explorer is going to prune a lot of the, unless they have a reason to keep it around for whatever their internal purpose is, they're going to prune all of that stuff. But the thing with this is, if you want to keep something around, then you should store it, and you should also store the SPV proof of the transaction that has it. So if I personally put something on the chain using op-return, and I personally have an economic or other reason to later prove that it did exist on the chain for my auditability reasons or whatever, I will need to keep a copy of that around. The blockchain, as I have said to people in the past, is not a magic hard drive in the sky where everybody's obligated to keep all of these things. So to answer that, I guess, if I'm somebody like Tokenized who does op-return transactions, or if I'm somebody who has a vested interest and I keep the transactions and I keep the SPV proofs, I am in a position where I'm fine. I'm not worried about printing because I personally will keep them around because that's what I have an interest in doing that, right? But if everybody, the error that people make is they rely on other people who have no obligation to keep something around to keep it around when they do these things, right? So I make an op-return and I just assume, okay, well, that's going to be around forever now. It's not, unless you have secured either a contractual obligation from a third party who has agreed to keep it around in exchange for consideration, or you are keeping it around yourself. And so what I've created with NanoStore is a way of actually storing the hash of data on chain, which is, I would say, as good as storing the data itself. And then actually securing a contractual obligation, so a framework for creating contracts around the storage and actually retention of that data. And that's actually what you need to do, and it's much cheaper if you need to have data sort of remain available. So the chain is not, putting something on chain like that and then using it as a journaling mechanism is only useful if you are keeping the journal and you can prove it. The journaling mechanism I refer to is only that I am journaling by writing these transactions. I am retaining the transactions. I am retaining the proofs, SPV proofs of each of those transactions in the block. And I can then present that to people who can then verify it easily with nothing other than the chain of headers. So
cool.
People, people misinterpret things, but that's the way that I see it anyway, and I think that's the correct way from an economic perspective to look at it in the long term.
Great. Well, I'll look at some of the stuff after and review what everybody has said and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I really need to just mess around with it and stuff. And I finally got iOS 15, so I have my focus modes, so I can turn off all notifications.
So you can focus again.
I can't tell you how many times I can't tell you how many times I sit down to do something and then whoop, message comes in and I'm off on something else. And so now it's like, finally, I can like put up boundaries. So it's been like
build, the better.
use.
I've been requesting that. I literally sent them emails for years. Go ahead.
Use what is that? Honest or Honest? The George's app.
Yeah, George's thing. Yeah. I did one time, but it was way premature. I wasn't even ready for the video, and I put up $5, and I'm like, I just got so stressed. But that's actually a cool idea to be able to. I would imagine as like if everybody really did that application. For those who don't know, it's like you have a goal and you put up money on. If you don't finish this goal, how much money are you going to lose? But I could imagine if you're like a project manager and you need to prioritize things, and if everybody like puts up money, then you can see like you could organize people better. But yeah, I failed miserably, then I haven't used it since. And I did a typo in my first one. I said videos instead of video, so I'm like, so it was, yeah.
Okay.
I should try it again, but yeah, I haven't used it. It's a cool idea though.
Yeah, you can even, he said you can even set it up so you go, if you didn't fulfill your promise, the fund will go to your enemies, like a repo. For example, if you didn't finish, they'll go to BTC. The fund, your fund will go to like a BTC fund or something. So that helps give you more incentive. So.
I want, but see, this is like putting up money. It's almost like a bet. What I would rather have is like shares in some sort of future revenue. That's what always motivates me the most.
I mean, carrots and sticks, right?
Yeah, you could have both.
It'd be interesting to build a contract that it doesn't take away your money, but it says if you don't finish this, then you don't get to have your money for 30 years. So either you're going to think in the long term by doing your goal, or you're going to think in the long term by saving your money for 30 years because you couldn't complete your goal. I mean, you're not losing out your money that way, at least. But yeah, just a random idea.
Yeah, there's so many cool ideas with the stuff, but we just need to. I just need to play around with it and have a simple way of accessing it from the UI. Go ahead.
No, sorry for interrupting. No, I was just going to say to Ty that judging by the number of dead projects that I have in GitHub repos, I will be a very wealthy man in 30 years' time.
Okay, that's good. So, yeah, I think okay, a couple of comments. One is for Stefan, you have been asking in the group, right, saying if there's any layer one. So the only, as far as I know, to my best knowledge, if you're layer one, you have this problem. If you put it in a single UTXO, you have the racing condition, right? So if you put it in multiple, the problem is you don't know in the downstream. It's not easy to verify whether this is coming from certain UTXO. For example, you issue like a Stefan token, and then Kevin have Kevin token, right? But then because you are using the same sCrypt code or script code template, so you cannot verify unless you go all the way to the Genesis, the issuance token. So that's I would say that's I don't know if it's fundamental or something, but nobody has come up with a viable solution yet. So all this solution right now, that if it's not in a single UTXO, you break it up into multiple UTXOs, you always have to rely on some external party, like either Oracle, or you have some kind of like an indexing server saying, okay, this UTXO belongs to this token. It can be traced back. So that's how I think SFP and Stars token, or none of them is like pure, just only in script. You have to rely on some, I think for the token swap or sensible tokens, they have to rely on Oracle service. So basically Oracle has to sign pretty much just you have to rely on some third party. Yeah, it's not only enforced by miners. I think it doesn't exist, at least to my best knowledge.
I have a couple of.
I don't know if I.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Ty, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I have a couple of different thoughts and ideas around this to verify what I think Xiaohui, you're saying about what this problem is. We have
back to Genesis. It even has a name.
We have a
back to Genesis.
Yes, we have a root. Okay, so we have a root UTXO, and then it splits off into like two chains or something, and then we want to merge those chains later, and we do not know when we merge if they are both coming from the same genesis. We can maybe, well, there's two ways I think we could use to sort of authenticate this. We could potentially use a digital signature so that we know it must come from, it must be coming from, signed by a certain key, and then that key can be held by the user. So then it's not really solving it, because it could potentially be a different UTXO, but it has the same owner, and we can verify digital signature back that this is the key of the one that is allowed to merge, and it must sign off on the previous transaction. Another solution, though, is to potentially use a hash chain. So if we take a certain 32-bit value and then hash it, and this would only work for a limited number, right? So we can only define, maybe we want to have a maximum chain of 10 for simplicity. Then we take a 32-byte number, or 256-bit, and we hash it like maybe 11 times. And we put that into we take that, and I'm thinking we can use the hash chain to, and then each time we forward, we go back one in the hash chain and reveal previous value. And then at the end, we can check when we merge that the hash is equal to the original value from the hash chain. So those are two ideas I have for solving the sort of merge problem, authenticating that it is allowed to merge and it is from the same chain.
I'm not entirely certain I understand quite what the problem is that we're talking about, but maybe I'm also not very clear in describing what it was that the problem was that I was not the problem really, but what I was trying to clarify and get some more information about. When I said layer 1 tokens or L1 tokens, I really meant any token that through its issuance, okay, let me call it a UTXO token. Right? The UTXO token ends up implicitly locking up some amount of Satoshis. Depending on, so there are two things in the token I'm going to call it token economics of this, right? One is that you're locking up Satoshis, but the Satoshis are not meant to be the most valuable thing here. Satoshis are really there as a way to keep the UTXO alive, right? So you don't have to worry about that. But then there is also the secondary part, which is that every time you transfer this token, there is going to have to be fees paid separate from the Satoshi value. Now, what amount of Satoshi should you keep locked up, and why? And do you keep above the dust limit, below the dust limit? Does it matter if you keep above or below the dust limit locked up? What are the consequences of doing either of these? If you do keep, so all these questions, right? If you keep a significant amount of Satoshis in there, all of a sudden the number of Satoshis locked up become more valuable than the actual redeemable value of the token itself. What now? Do you guard people from spending this, and do you make it a permission token that they have to spend back to the issuer, who will then melt the Satoshis back to their own account? There are all these sorts of questions that come up, right? What do you do with these locked Satoshis in this token? And if you look at from just a dollar value amount, from the dollar value point of view as well, any number of Satoshis that you lock up at scale becomes significant in terms of the amount of money that you're going to be locking up. And for the health of the blockchain, that's another thing that I was thinking about. You have all of these nonsensical voucher tokens that we're used to just chucking and throwing away. If people treat these vouchers as, say I'm doing a voucher system or a reward system, if people treat these reward systems like they do reward systems generally, which is that they will throw these things away, they will delete the app, they will lose their keys because they don't care about Satoshis in them, we are essentially destroying the Satoshi value of our blockchain implicitly.
I don't know if I agree with that. And the reason why is because if we are responsible issuers of tokens, we will have things coded like so that in 5 years, the issuer can simply reclaim the these Satoshis, but the other things you're referring to, I agree that they are valid as design considerations for any token. The issuer of the specific tokens in the specific circumstances needs to contend with these problems, and they need to encode in their scripts what is to be the thing that's going to happen. But I would say that the beauty of Bitcoin is we have the freedom on an individual case-by-case basis to design token systems that are working in this that work in the specific ways they need to. We could have a single Satoshi for fairly valueless things, but and you mentioned not using the Satoshis as the primary representation of the value. That's possible. We could just use one Satoshi. And in that case, I think it pretty much makes sense to use one Satoshi every time, or the dust limit, depending on what's allowed. But notably, the script can enforce the amount of Satoshis that is to be locked up, whether it's greater than, less than, or equal to the amount currently locked up for every time you roll it forward through the UTXO. That can be coded on a case-by-case basis as well. But I would say notably, it may be in certain cases that we're actually using the Satoshis themselves as a primary store of value for what value is in the token. So, potentially I would say people might want to collect revenue from the views of their videos as Satoshis, which they can then later, go on and redeem and sell for USD tokens or whatever. But that's a little bit separate. Native Satoshis as the potential way of having value, or having value be stored, of course, in a secondary, I guess, overlay type thing, like you say, with US dollars or whatever else. I just think it's completely agree with you on all those counts about things being valid as design considerations. But different ways of doing things, and we have many things that are going to compete.
Even for tokens, existing tokens that are using sCrypt or sCrypt, there are even two categories, right? One is, some people call it layer 0. That's fine. A stars token, right? Basically, they use the Satoshi amount as the token amount, versus some others like Sensible, or I think even SFP. They use it's a different, right? The number of Satoshi in the UTXO is independent of the number of tokens in the UTXO, because the amount is in the locking script. It's not in the UTXO amount. So it has two options actually. So I don't even know which one is better. Maybe the different cases by case, and so the only it's only
question about this.
Okay.
Yeah. So excuse my ignorance here about the way in which the dust limit works in the mining network. If I if I have a UTXO that is below the dust limit, does that imply that if I were to try and submit a transaction that spins that UTXO, that the mining network may or may not reject my spending transaction?
I think in my recollection, I don't know what's the dust limit now, but in old days of BTC geniuses, they think if the output is below dust limit, then the transaction will be rejected. So you never have the output with amount less than the dust limit. I don't know whether the latest SV node, but ideally that should not be even with that. It's like a centrally planning, right? So I mean, whoever wants. You put one Satoshi, that's fine, because they're going to pay fee anyway, right? Why do you even limit? I don't know what's the latest. I think, do you guys, anybody know what's the current dust limit, if that's still there? Is it one Satoshi or something?
It's
much lower. I think it's, all the complexity.
It is, so it used to be 546.
I think that's a formula.
It used to be
Depends on also on the output. like a complexity.
On the fee rate.
Size.
On the fee rate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're paying 250 Satoshis per byte, your dust limit, I believe, is 130 Satoshis or something like that, 132. But in the core days, it used to be 546, and that's because everybody you couldn't go below one Satoshi per byte. I think it was, and so because we can go lower than that, eventually it's going to be and I said this before, but we can do transactions with a fee, a minor fee, less than 1 Satoshi. So we don't even need to pay a whole Satoshi as a transaction fee to the miner. And when that happens, which we'll see how that develops, by definition, the dust limit would be far less than 1 Satoshi, because if the whole transaction fee is less than 1 Satoshi, you can't have 0, but you can have 1. And so I think that 1 Satoshi would be a reasonably popular number that people are going to settle on in the future. We're talking, when this happens, years out, right? Not right now. But for right now, I mean, I'll just throw 500 Satoshis in it and have a reissue provision so that when the time comes, I can swap out everybody's 400. I can take 499 Satoshis back and say thank you very much, and then they'll have 1 Satoshi.
Yeah, but just to
a number of years.
To summarize, yes, you should not never, if there's ever like a dust limit, you should never see an output with less than the limit, because that's what it does, right? Below that, I think the miner is going to reject it. But I don't know how much is it now, but I think eventually it probably go to either, I think it's going to 1 or even to 0.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go to
0.
0.
Yeah, 0 is 0 Satoshi. That's another completely.
There's a
like
whole debate about that, and
I think a 1 should be, the go to me. I don't know if it's 0. I think it's going to keep.
Back of the envelope. Sorry. No, I was going to say my back of the envelope calculations worked out for a price around $160 where we are right now, US dollars. If you were to issue 1 million tokens at 500, and you locked up about 500 Satoshis in each of the UTXOs, it would cost you about $80 US. That was sort of, that's kind of the number I came to. My calculations might be wrong, but I kind of landed there. Yeah.
If you do the, okay, so I'll let you finish, and then I have a question. I'm trying to remember it, but.
No, I'm done. You can go ahead.
Okay, so if you, Xiaowei said that there's 2 ways. There's one where you're, having the individual Satoshis, but then there's another one where you issue them independent. If you do the number independent, do you still have to pay the fees to lock them up?
I think yes.
I mean, you have to pay the transaction fee.
It's in the UTXO. He's saying you put it in different UTXOs, and each UTXO has to contain at least dust limit Satoshis, right? That's your cost. That's not, and I'm even not talking about the miner fee. That's just the cost you put in the UTXO. UTXO you cannot put 0, right? So that's like you can think about the minting cost or whatever cost, for the issued tokens. But it's much
So
cheaper than any other blockchains, right? That's the bottom line. Might be like 1,000 times. Or
now I have to review it more. I have to review this and study it more before I could have an intelligent conversation. So, it sounds like there's a lot of different ways of doing it. So that's cool. Thanks for all I'll watch this again a few times and absorb this better. Yeah,
basically think about when you, can I just try one more? Basically think about when you issue tokens, right? It's like a Bitcoin, it's like as Craig is always saying, right? Think about like an envelope, right? You stamp it. But the envelope, when you store information into it, the envelope itself has cost, right? That's like a UTXO. You think about it, the dust limit. You have to buy envelope from, I don't know, USPS or whatever, but it costs you. I mean, it's cheap, but still it's not 0, right? So that's the cost I think Stephan is talking about. And also it's a back of envelope, so it's really an envelope. So that's just coincidence.
Yeah, it's a good pun.
Coincidence. Yeah, I didn't notice. Okay.
Yeah.
So also when you
and the reason why I'm kind of
the transfer. Okay, can I finish the analogy? Basically, when you can store the tokens in UTXOs. Also, you have to move it around, right? That's like you have to pay the stamp fee, right? That's kind of like the minor fee. You have to use the USPS, the postal office network, to deliver your package. Right? That's two things. You have to buy the envelope. You also have to post the stamp, right? So that's like a two costs you have to add together.
Got it.
That's a good analogy. The reason why I'm interested in knowing these costs right is because it ties into trying to figure out what types of token systems can be delivered profitably into the market. What are you trying to issue that you'd be able to do profitably and at a competitive rate relative to existing solutions? If somebody is doing a MySQL database-based reward scheme, right? If you take all of their total cost total cost of systems delivery, they would come down to a near marginal cost of zero over the more tokens that they issue, right? Because MySQL databases, so and there has to not just be the fact that it's actually a voucher that's getting issued, but you'd actually have to have a compelling reason why a blockchain-based voucher has some sort of an edge over just the centralized database version of this type of issuance.
Yeah,
and
I think
the cost is kind of one factor that I'm trying to kind of get a handle on. Yeah.
Well, maybe I need to reconsider this, but the biggest thing we were talking about, I think that we started the video last time, was just the ability to do micropayments. And because again, the whole thing with on the white papers, like there's going to be a cost to having financial institutions like mediating transactions. And so there's always the 2% plus 10-cent fee. But if we are able to get rid of that and have it in code, then you can do things cheaper than the 2% plus 10 cents. So in my mind, and I also have to consider things like money laundering laws and stuff, but in my mind, I'm just thinking, a little video, it's $100 and it gets $100, like, because the majority of people on YouTube, they don't have a ton of views. So once you get to somebody who has a lot, then you can start doing, identification and money laundering stuff. I have to really study that before I do any of this stuff, and I don't have any immediate plans for it.
Yeah,
but
I think in most
just small.
Yeah, just very quick. I think in most jurisdictions, I think there's a daily limit or monthly. It's like $100 in US or maybe like $100 in euros or something in Europe. So below that, you don't have to like KYC or whatever AML. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, and so then people can just they have and maybe it's somebody in Africa or something who they don't have a huge it's like a $10 goes a long way or something like that. But if you have a $10 video or $100 video, and then the creator owns 50 of the share or 50% of the shares, and then the person who filmed it owns 10%, and the first 10 fans on the rest or something, then it just pays out dividends, so I think that would be so cool. And I would be, there's just so many things. Like if you look in the back of a movie when they play the reels, there's like the producers, there's
credits,
the cameramen, there's makeup artists. Yeah, and all of them get paid. But in YouTube, there's not a good way. I mean, you can make an agreement to go ahead and do that, but sometimes people forget or they don't want to.
Economic friction of doing that is very high for the values involved. So if it was automated, it would be much more compelling as something. that you would
Exactly.
consider doing. One thing
people do a lot of videos, and I'll let you go, but people do a lot of videos. And so maybe this one's only worth $100, but this one's worth, more or less or whatever. And people just crank out videos like a daily vlog and that kind of stuff. And everybody in the video gets a little bit of money. And so go ahead, Ty.
One thing, Stefan, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned that if you were to issue, for example, 1 million tokens at 500 per, 500 Satoshis per token, then the cost would be, the cost would be like $80 or whatever it would be. But the way that I would go about issuing such a system, if I was designing it, is I would issue lots of, I would issue sort of like sets of tokens, one per each user. So I wouldn't use Satoshis natively unless I actually wanted to convey, that $80 of value to each of the users in native Satoshis, right? If I was doing something like that, I would obviously need to spend the money. But if I was just creating a reward voucher system, the points themselves could be defined as a property of the, just a data field of the state that you put, and you could say like, okay, this UTXO is worth 300,000. This one's worth 100,000. This one's worth 6. And you would only need to issue 3 UTXOs and spend 1,500 Satoshis, lock up 500 Satoshis into each one just to keep the UTXO alive. And so unless your points derive their value from being equivalent in value to native Satoshis, I don't see a reason to issue in that way. But if they're derived from other value, if they're just being issued kind of out of thin air, like a rewards, like a voucher or something, then I think there are more economically efficient ways than as you described. And just like it says in the white paper, we would need to create like 1 million transactions for each of them, unless there's 1 million individual token holders. But like I referenced the line in the white paper, it says it would be unwieldy to make a separate transaction for every cent in a transfer, so to speak. We can lot them together. We can merge them, and I think that would help lower the costs. But again, I just would reiterate that it's case by case, right? We can pick different things for different depending on what your use case is.
Right. I think I understand what you're saying. I was literally sort of locked into the idea that there is going to be a one-to-one issuance, 1 token for each person, or at least, or each person is going to have, or let me put it differently, there's going to be 1 token per UTXO. And yes, a person can have more than 1 UTXO, can have ownership of more than 1 token, but then they would have many UTXOs. But I guess what you're essentially pointing out is
combining and splitting value.
Yeah, you can issue the UTXO to the person with the accrued value of the token. Like if you're issuing them 5 tokens, then it's still their UTXO. It can only ever be their UTXO, but the UTXO itself has the internal counter that keeps track of how many of these things they now have. So
right, and then the script will enforce the state. The script will not let you change that. It's not like it works the same way as the Satoshis work. You can't go and make a transaction where it's out of line because the script wouldn't let it. It wouldn't let it happen. And you can use, if you want to merge them, and this is where we talk about the Genesis problem. If you want to merge them together, you can use a hash chain and get it to you can actually reveal values progressively until you get back to the original pre-calculated value, and you can allow the tokens to rediscover each other and reunite and come back and become friends again or something after they split off.
That sounds like a happy ending. Wow.
Yes, exactly, for the tokens. So you can do that stuff. And I hope people can, I don't have the skills to build this in sCrypt, but I will learn. I will hopefully learn that soon, and I hope people can figure out a way to solve that using hash chains, because I really think that's possible, and I'm going to have to look into it more. But that's something that can hopefully work.
Yeah, I think I also put a note after this. I'll think about it whether we can do this with the hash chain. So yeah, maybe possible. I'll give you a thumbs up. But it's good to we brainstorm and so people know this idea exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never thought about this prior to this discussion. Yeah, and,
Cool.
and another high level comment I always have is so whenever somebody proposes to do something using Bitcoin, I always ask at least two questions. First, do you really need Bitcoin for this, or what if you just put in some like a MyCircle database, right? So that's one. Second is, do you really need your own token? Can you just use the native Bitcoin Satoshis? So, and also, yeah, the first one, for example, right? The Kevin, you have been talking about this since even we talked about this since last episode. So basically, the revenue split idea you mentioned is already exists, right? In Streamanity. I don't know whether you use it, but you can, that's
right.
a tab. You can say split, share the revenue, right? Then you can say, oh, this maybe this video, let's say, 20% goes to Stefan or 10% goes to Kevin. If whoever watches this, right? The Streamanity already have this built in. So what would the benefit if you want to put in, let's say, in a smart contract or anything, right? So I think about it is, for example,
well,
right,
do they not? Okay, go ahead.
So it's always trust, right? The smart contract always, I think, is to solve the fundamental problem of trust. Because if you trust Streamanity, the platform is doing the right calculation, because you have to put the money in to them, and then they will distribute it out, right? So if you trust them, you don't need this. But imagine now you go to a random website. So it says, okay, so if you're a creator, you get 90%. If you're like adding like a timestamp or even a translation, you get 10%. Because I don't know this with random website, right? Like how many times you go to some random like an internet website, you don't know them, you don't know. So in that case, I would think that's a good use case.
But it's not just about trust, because like Streamanity's model also depends on the platform. It's not really, portable. You can't make other clients of it because it would need its own system. So that's the benefit of doing anything on layer one, right? You can just build another client. If Streamanity goes bankrupt, it doesn't matter, right?
Yes, so, that's another one.
Yeah, and I agree. It doesn't. It's like it's not really useful to even like think about tokens. It can be just Satoshis, and yeah.
Satoshis are pretty useful. I mean, we should use them when we can. People are figuring that out. Finally, it's been about 15 years or so, but pretty useful.
Better late than never, right? Yeah, but yeah, it's all about getting. I mean, it also depends on your use case, right? Because like how do you solve like million concurrent viewers? Like some videos on YouTube, for example, have that. It would definitely need to be some kind of distributed process, right? And I don't know, maybe like who would do the consolidation? Maybe that could be relied upon the platform to actually like publish consolidation. That's the transactions we were talking about earlier that actually pay out the stakeholders of the video and stuff like that. Yeah, that's.
You could, I think, imagine. You could imagine too. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say it. I think it can be done on a global scale, like efficiently, even using layer one, but it would need a good system, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I would rather it be like, industrial scale instead of some silly thing. But obviously, sometimes in the beginning, it has to be some silly thing just to get your feet wet. But you could imagine, like, even now with, you know, like who owns the right to a music album or who owns whatever. You know, that's people buy these things and people get upset if they don't own them, and there's all sorts of things. And I feel like just having a system that could manage that better, you know, would be very cool. But I don't know enough about it, so I just wanted to ask you guys and start the discussion.
Yeah, I think that there is a problem on the product side which really needs thinking about around this concern that you have, not a concern, but this question I think you have around rewarding or distributing funds in this automated manner. And that is the distribution channel itself. YouTube is Google's distribution channel. They own it, and as such, tying in third-party tooling to views, the identity of the viewer, and things like that becomes increasingly difficult depending on the sort of APIs or tooling that is available to you to hook your application or your whatever it is that you're doing into that distribution channel, right? What most people have done in order to solve this is build up their own distribution channels. So if you look at any of the current social media reward systems that work around the blockchain, they've essentially built up their own clones of YouTube and Spotify, etc., where they own the distribution channel, which means that they accurately track views, and you can accurately track the identity of the person, of the viewer, which you can then tie back into what the reward payouts should be. Without ownership or a really strong tie into the distribution channel, everything that you said becomes so much harder to do.
Right. Yeah, but if going back to Craig's recent presentation at Zurich, he kept on saying, we're going to give you the tools to own your own data. And if you don't like the front end, you pick up and decide to move to a new one. So if you don't like Twitter, is what he said, then you can get up and move, and all your data remains with you, or something like that, what I just said. And so yeah, I wonder what that's going to look like in the future and how that will be possible. But imagine if you have some data, whether it's a video or whatever, and then maybe one of the shareholders will be the front end. You know, if you're delivering the best user interface, maybe then you're going to be you'll get a fraction of that revenue or something like that.
I've built that. So, I'm very, very tempted to. I mean, I've created systems that do that. I could share my screen and show how that works, but I don't want to go off too far away from the topic of this of this forum. But there's ways of doing that. There's a thing called action-oriented programming where users take actions. The actions belong to the users and not to the apps that define those actions. And then whoever's app is used by a user to create certain types of actions receives revenue. And there's developer incentives, there's content creator incentives, and other such things. So I have two competing messaging app front ends. And if I use I have one called Convo and one called Convo Dark. If you use Convo Dark to create your message actions, which are defined in a standardized cross-app compatible format, then Convo Dark gets an action commission. And if you use Convo, the normal Convo, not Convo Dark, Convo, the developers of Convo, both of which are me, so either way I get money. But if other people make apps, then good. They get the revenue from the actions. They get the action commissions, and you can define specific prices. So as the app developer, I get to say, well, I think people are going to like dark mode a little more. So when people use Convo Dark to make their actions, it's going to cost 2 Satoshis instead of 1 Satoshi per action, or whatever the revenue may be. So market forces incentivize good UX, and users actually own things so people can leave if they want, because I should be able to use I should be able to quit Discord without losing all of my friends that I have on Discord. I should be able to talk to people without forcing them into using the same app, and thereby endorsing and supporting the company that has certain policies and beliefs as I do, because that creates problems in the wider systemic view. But yeah, I could go on for hours about that. I won't, but it's in the works.
You've already,
you should check out my stuff. And yes, I have built some of that stuff.
Great. And it's Project Babbage on YouTube.
Project Babbage on YouTube is my channel, and then projectbabbage.com, where I have just some videos, mainly developer resources. I also got metanetportal.com for my users, but yeah, you have a piece of software on your computer. That software tracks the actions that you take across all of your apps, and those actions are aggregated together and stored like on your, they're your actions. They're not the app's actions. You do things, you own, and you are also accountable for what you do. And there is actions have a cost, you know, it's like reality. It's crazy how that works, right? People actually have to be accountable.
Yeah, I watched your first video you posted on the Metanet like a long time ago, and I commented, so I think we talked about that. And then I saw you posted some recently, and I skimmed through, and I need to sit down and watch it. But there's just I'm going to. But I did see the thing about the user actions, something, and stuff like that. So I'll look at
developers, so developers who are trying to do stuff with Bitcoin should make apps that are Metanet compatible, right? That use actions, because then they're going to have to compete on UX. Their users will own their data, and that is a very big statement that you're making to your users, that you believe in your UX so much that you're willing to let the users leave if they want. I mean, what an idea, right? Imagine if Skype came out with a new UI and it was compatible with Discord, and they were like, we think you're going to love this so much that we're actually going to let you leave and not force you to stay on our platform.
Yeah, that's something I think I haven't fully understood from the incentive part. Basically, like Michael said, right, or Kevin, like Stephen. Basically, now if you want to make, like Craig said, is own your own data, and then you can switch seamlessly across different, let's say, front ends, right? For example, you have Trash, right? I think I haven't used it, but I think there's some other, like besides Trash.com, you may have some other front end, right? You can switch. But then there's a incentive, but I think that's a fundamental issue I see here. Basically, what's my incentive if I'm like Trash.com, right? If I want to get all my users, but then somehow some other guy get much better UI, just all my users, they can just migrate overnight to the other platform. So I lost all my stickiness, right? So if you think about all the Google, Facebook, they want the platform to be as sticky as possible. So all the people who come into Walled Garden, they don't, it's like Apple, right? You have iPhone, you have everything. It's pretty much like a Walled Garden, and you cannot even live without all this income. In theory, you can live, but it's just causing a lot of inconvenience.
You can check out, but you can never leave.
Yeah. So what do you guys think?
There was actually some
point.
I think in the GDPR, which is like the privacy thing in Europe, there was some stuff, because once they published, I think it was a couple of years ago, but like all this stuff came out for iOS developers too, and I had to read it all. But one of the big things in that was data portability. So you're supposed to be able to export your data and then import it to somebody else. Nobody really does it well, but like right after that happened, you can go to Facebook and download all your photos and stuff. You could go to iCloud and download all your stuff. But as far as it just being portable, where you can just upload it into something else, it doesn't really work like that. But yeah, I agree with you. I wonder what the incentive is. And maybe it just has to be something that starts fresh. Sorry, I'll let you go in a sec. But something that starts fresh, where there is this base layer protocol, and then it's just like a marketplace, just like WordPress themes or whatever, where people start competing to be the you know, it's like new skins or something. I don't know how that would work. Somebody would have to ask Craig. So
maybe like on a proper incentive for new companies, that why would they use such a system is it would lower the barrier for entry, because for example YouTube managing large video files and stuff, it's like a really steep like entry. You have to put up capital to do like proper to host the servers and do backups and all this stuff. And even that like it doesn't have to be like one protocol, or you can have like a separate thing for likes and comments and stuff. And you could also tie that in with for example content distribution network that would be based on Bitcoin, right? Something like that already even exists. It's called like it's a video website called BitChute, but where actually clients also seed the video chunks, right? But the problem with that is they don't get really anything for it, right?
It's like
it's supposed to be like censorship resistant, but you still rely on actually the client to I mean not the client, the server, right?
Yeah.
But you could actually like and such a content distribution system could be used in like it doesn't have to be really a video. It's the same system could be used like for other stuff, and it would drastically lower the barrier for entry for all
that makes sense.
companies.
That makes sense to me.
To address the point of sort of these platforms, and then they all want to be sticky, right? They all want to make it so that people stay around all the time, like Google and Facebook. I think we actually have to invert that, and here's why I think the incentives would work. I think as the ecosystem grows, and keep in mind, I'm speaking in terms of decades here. So I'm going to build this, and it's going to take a long time and whatnot. But as more things emerge that work in this way, whether because I build them or because I convinced some other people to build them at the beginning, I think it's actually going to be like a proof of the demonstration of the loss of opportunity cost around stickiness. So same like how proof of work works right now, where people say, I'm so honest that I'm willing to, spend all of this capital in order to to demonstrate to the world how honest I am. And it can all be taken away if ever I do anything bad, right? And then the law enforcement is the person who can take it away. In this case, I think that what would happen as the system grows and becomes more mature, companies would basically be making the reason why companies would lose their stickiness is they would say they would basically be making a statement that they are so their UX is so good that they don't need to be sticky because they are confident that people will stick around on their platforms voluntarily. Like they don't need to, like they are being more transparent with their data and the way that things are handled, and using open protocols and such, mainly on chain protocols and whatnot, because they are confident that people will and people are going to value that, right? Like, so people are going to have two ecosystems, right? They're going to see this metanet as like an ecosystem separate from the internet. You can be on the internet where you have passwords and stickiness, or you can be on the metanet where there's no stickiness and no passwords. And users are going to value the ecosystem as a whole. They're going to see the whole ecosystem is going to have a level of stickiness around it. Once you're in the metanet, you're not going to want to leave the metanet. But within that, we can create a very large walled garden in which all of the other walled gardens do not need to exist any longer, where users are the walled gardens are on their own data, but that's it. I think users are going to like that, and that's going to be the primary incentive around making that happen. Very, very long-term bet, though.
Yeah, well, I also think in the same way, the metaphor I always use is capitalism versus feudalism. But right now you sort of have these feudal gatekeepers where like the big internet companies, but capitalism is far more efficient. And it grew more goods and services and wealth. And so without going into that whole metaphor, just if you forget about what I just said, if we did have like a group of, 10 people that were competing on UX, then in theory, the UX would get so much better than something like Facebook that people would want to be, because competition is driving the innovations. And if you look at it too, most of these people are just ripping each other off anyways, whether it's Snapchat, then Instagram rips it off. And because you can't patent UIs, there's no,
a reason for that.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's I feel like there would be more progress and better user interfaces if people could just get up and move. And it's kind of like the Red Queen game or anything in nature. I think it's better. It's but yeah, it's uncomfortable for people, and that's always been a stickler with. Yeah, that's always been a battle with capitalism versus any other systems. People always want to get control and stop progress. So I don't know how that's going to happen, but I feel like if you just had a core people that understood the values of competition and capitalism, and then got together in this new system, then it would become so much better than whatever exists, that it would dominate, just like capitalism dominated in Europe over feudalism.
But you got to understand that even if MetaNet will grow and we will have like this one big giant system, even then companies will be selfish. They will always be. But the point is they won't be able to, because, for example, let's say one of these service providers got the bright idea to store the images only for themselves, so that will keep users locked, right? But then users from other platforms will just notice that they're not available there. So, and that will force
it'll lock them out
away. Yeah,
it'll lock them out.
They will just have to play by the new game's rules, right? Yeah.
I'd like to be a little bit contrarian about this topic. I don't know if data ownership, personal data ownership is actually a thing. I know that it's been theorized that it's going to be valuable. I know that we would like to see data ownership. I have not seen the killer app for personal data ownership. I have not seen users express an interest in data ownership so strongly that they have actually overcome the pain of migrating from one mode into another application for that reason en masse. So from a product development standpoint, I know that data ownership is talked about a lot, and that we would all like to see it. But I don't know that I've seen the killer application yet that demonstrates that it is actually a thing.
I think one of the things to consider is just security. So the more that we have all of these things in the big crunchy shells, as Craig says, but the more that we gather all this stuff and we don't have it owned by individuals, then it's vulnerable to people that want to get hack into it. And so even if you look at something like Apple, they've designed their architecture with the phones and stuff where the data is on device, and they make that distinction a lot. And and they, on some of their products they do, but on others they don't have access to the stuff in the cloud. It's encrypted with a key that's on your device, and they don't even know what that is. And so in terms of data ownership, if there can be distributed keys, you know, that the individual owns that unlock something or whatever, then I think the killer app, and it may even be implemented by somebody like Apple who already has a similar architecture, you know what I mean? But maybe the killer app is just data security.
Yeah, I think
data security.
It'll take one of the big boys to prioritize it, possibly. It would be brilliant if somebody could actually break one of the moats of the big boys with some brilliant capitalist, economically incentivized voodoo, right? I'm still waiting to see that happen though, and I don't have a clear idea of how that is going to come about. So the same economic incentives that underpin, for example, Bitcoin's incentives for miners to keep investing in the network, those similar economic incentives exist in big tech today for them to preserve their moats, to lock users in. And it's actually a disincentive for them to give access to the user's data. And they have repeatedly demonstrated a willingness to fight really hard to the tunes of spending tens of millions of dollars on lawyers to try and protect those moats, right? So I think that they're not going to go willingly, right?
No.
That's why my life is going to be interesting.
So
I take it as a challenge, though.
When it comes to the distribution channels that I was talking about before, right? The distribution channels today are owned by big tech. And the distribution channels are really the way in which you end up inverting the model. You have to essentially seize the distribution channel. And I'm not saying you should go and convince the government to allow you to seize YouTube. I'm saying
no, you mean build a better distribution channel and own that or something.
It's going to have to come to that. Somebody's going to have to build a better distribution channel that sucks up value from the other guy and forces them to change their business model if they want to stay relevant. That's the only way that I think it's going to happen.
Without going,
I wonder if there's a company. Sorry, I'll be super quick, but I wonder if there is a company that we could go to that's like, you know, maybe minority that wants like Snapchat or something, and like trying to work with them or something like that. I don't know, because building a brand new distribution channel is a lot of work, but
it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
without going into too much detail about my long-term plans, I think there is room for a third mobile operating system in which devices communicate on a peer-to-peer mesh using 802.1 what's it called, the ad hoc networks, 802.11 like the ad hoc wireless networks, and they pay each other for network availability, connectivity using BSD micropayments. I think and sequence and lock time are cool, and they can be used for that. We can create. I mean, there is a thing that exists that is being worked on called Babbage OS. It is a thing, it's going to be tons of work. And if you guys want to help me, then cool. Let's chat about that. And that applies to anybody who watches this. But yeah, let's build it. I mean, what the heck? What are we waiting for? It's gonna make it interesting.
I think one of the things that we don't realize, or at least, you know, it's like with me and my apps, like what I really needed to be doing early on was building a team. And because I had all these ideas, and I got bigger and bigger. I'm like, oh, I can't even manage this at all. There's actually this book, it's called The E-Myth. I don't know if anybody has heard of, but it's like an essential business book to read. But it's like, it talks about that. It's like most people that go into business just build the stuff, like whether it's a bakery and they just start baking all the pies, but it reaches a breaking limit where one person can't do it. And so what you really need to focus on as an entrepreneur is building the team that builds, in this case, the pies, or in this, or in our example, the code. And so, but what is that going to look like in the future? What are software companies going to look like? Is it going to be actually like in a building with, you know, or is it going to be hybrid? Is it just going to be online? Can you really build a company without meeting people in person? I don't know. It's kind of something, because there's a lot of freedoms that I've had over the years of just being an independent app developer that, you know, if I had to actually create a company, I would lose a lot of those freedoms. But now with all this COVID stuff and people rebelling, now a lot of people have the same freedoms that I have now. And now I'm kind of, and I actually, one of the things, sorry for rambling, but one of the things about working alone for so long is it's kind of lonely. And so I actually like get excited about going to a building. So yeah, I think there's a balance, but it should, I wouldn't want to go 9 to 5, 5 days a week. But if there could be a more hybrid approach, then suddenly the idea of growing a big company actually sounds exciting to me. And I think that's only going to continue with better internet connections, like the Starlink thing, and you know, you'll be able to be really remote everywhere. So it's exciting. But that's all I had to say.
Guys, I will have to go.
Yeah, I know we've gone over a bit.
Yeah,
I gotta eat and stuff. So
yeah.
Okay.
If you want to continue, I'll watch the rest on YouTube. But
okay. Any closing thoughts, gentlemen? That we can call it a day and talk next week. I think we got a lot of covered, and
we can come back here next week.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot here.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, you can. If you can you share the whatever you shared in the other Slack channel? Yeah, we can take a look.
Yes, I'll put the paper up in there too, and people can go on YouTube if they watch. They can go on sCrypt Slack and check out the paper. And yeah, I'll definitely share that.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. All right. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Wherever you are, and I hope to see you next week. Okay, Stefan, good night.
Right.
Okay, Michael,
Thanks,
Ty,
guys.
Kevin.
See you
Okay,
next week.
see you next time. Okay.
Bye.